Lesson 12, we're going to build onto the three-note dynamic pattern. We're also going to be looking at a way of rounding off some of these dynamic patterns with a bend on the second string. Let's take a look now. Let's take a look now at our three-note pattern that we used for our dynamic phrase. There it is. Now, we took a look at going like this and then coming back to the third string to complete our melodic phrases. But there's a very cool, interesting note you can bend, which is the second string, 8th fret, in the pentatonic scale. This note here. It's not easy to get to, but I'll show you how it's done. We start off with our three-note pattern. When we finish the last note on the first string, we let go, quickly form our fingers for appropriate bend action. Again, our thumb should be here, little finger out, fingers leaning back, and we bend the 8th fret. Now, if you notice pitch-wise when I bend this note, it's exactly the same note as the note that was played at the end of our first three-note pattern. Now, it's important we get all our fingers together. It's quite hard to bend with one finger or even two there. And once again, our first finger should be in a muting role as well as assisting in the bend, so when we collect the strings up, we don't hear them come through the amp. Now, you can try doing this, and when you get complete and you've perfected doing this actual move here to the bend, you may wonder, well, where shall I go from this bend note here? Well, just like the third string, it's quite difficult to know when you're propping that string up and you're waiting, because it's the end of a phrase, what to do with it. A lot of people will often bend here, and they'll suddenly, not knowing where to go, drop down and then simply end on this note here. Now that's okay, but the problem is when you're first starting out with leads, your fingers often do follow the same patterns all the time, and habits develop and you get stuck in a rut, and every time you do one phrase you think to yourself, why do I keep doing this over and over and over again? Well, this is such a case where if you bend here and always do that, that phrase will become a habit and it won't sound that good. So what I'm suggesting you do, after this bend, go back to the mini bar and hit the first string again, then down the scale to this note, and then to here. So we go bend, we can hold it as long as we want, and these three notes in the scale connect us back into our mid-range position where we can complete some nice melodic phrases. I'll just demonstrate on my own. Hold, connect, round off with a nice little melodic phrase. Now, going to this bend does require, as I said, quite a bit of practice, and letting go and going to the first string is important that you do it in such a way that you don't hear this bend suddenly sag and drop down while you go to the first string. We want to make a clean change from here to here. Now, going on from there, let's look at some other dynamic patterns. We've got a 4-note, a 5-note, and a 6-note that we can learn. Let's try them now. If you've already mastered and perfected how to do the 3-note, these shouldn't be quite too difficult. Our 3-note once again, 1, 2, 3, made up of 3 notes which we can repeat over and over again to get some nice dynamic playing. But we can also do a 4-note, which would consist of the first 3, 1, 2, 3, and then keeping the mini bar down, go to the second string to complete 4 notes in a pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4. And once again, for practice purposes, you may wish to try the 4-note pattern and round it off with a bend at the 8th fret, and of course connect back down into the scale. Now this one in particular is very useful if you want to generate a lot of energy and speed. I'll just play it to you. Now how did I do that? Well, picking wise, although it's 5 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I used a pull-off, 1, 2, 3, 4, between note 4 and 5, which means I only had to pick the string once. So in actual fact, the right hand picking is always doing the same sequence over and over again. And it's better to start with an upstroke, because that way you're working inside the strings rather than on the outsides of them. Let's take a look at this slowly. First the left hand. Bend. There's our 3 note. There's our pull off, and then it comes around again. Now let's take a look at the right hand before completing the lesson looking at the 6 note pattern. Now with the right hand for the 5 note pattern, I mentioned it's useful to pick with an upstroke so that in effect you're playing inside the strings rather than on the outside edges. If I begin with a downstroke, the silly thing is, although it's not much of a distance, it's actually the distance of the width of the 3rd string, but by starting with an upstroke each time, now remember it's an even note pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's a pull off, I get more speed than I do if I go this way, if I start with a downstroke. So I would recommend, when practicing this 5 note pattern, to try beginning with an upstroke each time. Watch when you pick there, you do a downstroke and you pull off and then you come in up again. Always feels funny when you do a pull off and you hear 2 notes and you've only picked it once, so don't let that throw you off. Now we're going to go back to the left hand and look at our last 6 note pattern. For those of you wondering, a pull off is where you play a note once, keep the pressure down, and move the finger off to the side. Here I'm on the 8th fret of the 2nd string. I play the note with the right hand, and while it's ringing, I pull it off to the side, producing another tone. It's really the opposite of a hammer-on, which, as you remember from the other lesson some time ago, we play the note, produce another tone by tapping it on. Now let's take a look at the 6 note pattern and final pattern in our dynamic series on these first 3 strings. We've got 4 notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, and our 5th and 6th note is a pull off from the 8th fret 2nd string to the 5th fret 2nd string. 1, 2, 3, 4, pick and pull off. Now once again, as with the 3, 4 and 5 note pattern, we can do the 6 note pattern and end with our bend on the 8th fret of the 2nd string. We can go to our little connector notes. And when you get quite fluent at doing this, after the little connector pattern of notes, which follow from the bend, you can often go in and out of different patterns. You may do a 3 note, 5 note, and a 6 note like that. To conclude, I'll just demonstrate with a rock backing pattern.